Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 9 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs. The first 5 main topics are as follows. In the first topic, in the wake of demands by several states to reduce down the ecologically sensitive areas, we will try to understand the urgent need of the protection of the Western Ghats. In the second topic, we will try to understand what are the causes behind the rising nitrous oxide emissions and what is India's response to that. Then in the third topic, we will try to read about what is the rationale behind the exclusion of heat waves from the notified disasters. Followed by the fourth topic, where we will try to inquire what is mercy petition and the pardoning powers of the president. And finally, in the fifth topic, we will try to read about the fatty liver disease and the preventive steps that can be taken. Towards the end, there will be news snippets especially curated to help you excel in the prelims examination, so stay tuned. Recently, 3 states, Karnataka, Goa and Maharashtra, have sought reduction in the ecologically sensitive areas in the Western Ghats, citing the development works which is required to take place. What are these ecologically sensitive areas? What is this urgent need for the protection of Western Ghats? We are going to cover that and much more in this very interesting section, which also forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment conservation. Before that, let's have a brief understanding about the news which featured today, where the center is trying to designate ecologically sensitive areas in 6 states. The 6 states where these Western Ghat ranges from. So if we go from north to south, these 6 states are Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, covering around the distance of 1500 to 1600 kilometers. This ecologically sensitive areas which has been proposed, it is proposed to stop polluting activities and deforestation, basically to reduce down the anthropogenic activities in the Western Ghats. The largest area under this ecologically sensitive area falls in the state of Karnataka, followed by Maharashtra, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Goa, and keep this in mind that Gujarat has the least ecologically sensitive area in the totality of the Western Ghats. Now, recently the government has formed a Sanjay Kumar panel, which is basically in the continuation of the various draft which the center has been issuing. For example, it issued in 2014 till 2018. Now, this Sanjay Kumar panel has been designated to form the ecologically sensitive areas in the region of these Western Ghat states. However, the states has formed a strong opposition to these ecologically sensitive areas, citing various reasons. For example, Karnataka has opposed the K. Kasturirangan report of 2013, which actually designated 37% of the area under ecologically sensitive area, 37% area of the Western Ghats. Goa has also demanded to reduce the total 1461 km square area under this ecologically sensitive area to be reduced down by 370 km square. Now the question arises that why these states are opposing such a noble initiative? The answer to that is that if ecologically sensitive area is going to be declared in the region of Western Ghats in this particular states, then there will be a strong prohibition on the development activities. The development activities such as mining, thermal power plant, on any high polluting industry, building, construction and township, or if you are developing any project which is above 50 hectares of area. Now the question arises that what is this need of immediate protection which shall be provided to this region of Western Ghat? The region of Western Ghat, which is also called as Sahyadri or the Greater Escarpment of India, due to its volcanic origin. As per the K. Kasturirangan committee, this Western Ghats forms the cradle of the evolutionary diversity which ranges from millions of years in our country. These Western Ghats, which are spread in 6 states, they are around 1600 km long. They start from the south of Satpura range from the Tapi estuary and extends up to Kanyakumari in the south. So this is almost a contiguous and a continuous range. However, there are certain important gaps. such as one which is found in Goa. Other important gaps which takes place in Palakkad, also called as Palghat Gap. The Palghat Gap, which is between the Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu and Palakkad in Kerala. Now, these Western Ghats also form 1 out of 42 UNESCO World Heritage Sites which we have in our country, and they are one of the 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world. Now, another important information is that these Western Ghats, they come down and they meet the Eastern Ghats at a place called as Nilgiri. And the highest mountain range in this Western Ghats is your Anaimudi Peak, which is around 2695 meter tall, and that is in the state of Kerala. Now, when we have inquired about some basic features of Western Ghats, let's try to understand the importance of it. The importance of it is that it acts as a major watershed where various perennial river originates from these Western Ghats such as Godavari, Krishna and Kaveri, which actually drains 40% of the total area of our country, thus providing the continuous water supply to the millions of people. You guys might be hearing in the news quite frequently about the Kaveri dispute which is taking place between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu for the water sharing, right? Then it also acts as a major determinator of the climate and seasons, where these Western Ghats, they actually stop the rain-led winds or the monsoon which arrives, which is flowing in the eastern direction from this Arabian Sea. And thus they act as a major watershed here, where major rainfall takes place here on this windward side. And on this leeward side, it is obviously that by the time the clouds crosses these mountain range and they reaches to this leeward side, they have drained most of their precipitation, and that is why these regions they receive lesser rainfall. Now they also play some important ecological function. So for example, because of the large and vast amount of forest which they have, they play a very important role in the carbon dioxide sequestration, where they almost take out 40 million ton of CO2 from the atmosphere. At the same time, they play a vital role as a biodiversity hotspot, where they have got 30% of the flora and fauna of our country, and 60% of this flora and fauna are endemic, which means it is only found in the region of the Western Ghat. As per IUCN, they also have 325 globally threatened species, out of which 51 are critically endangered. Some prominent species about whom you guys might be reading daily in the news, such as lion-tailed macaque, the Nilgiri teher, your tiger, elephants, gaur, dhole. All of these important species are found in these regions of Western Ghat. At the same time, they also hold a lot of prominence for our economy because they serve a lot of important commercial functions, such as they have large reservoirs of minerals such as iron, bauxite, manganese. A lot of commercial crops grows in this region. So for example, if you are reading your modern history, you guys will be reminded about the coming of Vasco da Gama and what he took from these regions of Western Ghat. He took pepper, he took cardamom, also the growing of tea, the coffee which you are having while watching this lecture, the high amount of rubber which is produced from this particular region. And this region also acts as a source of timber, thus supplying to the industries of paper, plywood, etc. At the same time, these regions are widespread and very popular tourist hotspots, especially in the peninsular India. The tourist hotspots such as your Mumbai, your Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg, Goa, Kudremukh, Ooty, Munnar. The very famous Jog Falls lies in the region when you are traveling from Karnataka to Goa. Thus, Western Ghats are also very much important for our economy. But this region is facing severe amount of threat. And obviously, the humans are no far behind in this cause as well. So, there are a lot of anthropogenic causes. First and foremost is obviously the commercial plantation. So since the arrival of the Britishers in the 1850s, this region has actually led to the increase in the agricultural area. So a lot of commercial plantation has been impenetrated in this particular region. The commercial crops which we are discussing about, such as rubber, tea and coffee, and because of that it had actually led to large scale deforestation. At the same time, livestock grazing is also being done for the economic causes of the animal husbandry, and because of that reason the topsoil, which is actually the most fertile layer, that is being removed, leading to the soil degradation. Then the illegal hunting as well as the human wildlife conflict which takes place in this region. So it is obvious that this region is a biodiversity hotspot. At the same time, the human population is increasing. So with increasing human population, there will be increasing requirement of roads, homes, industries, and because of that the human animal wildlife conflict is actually increasing. For example, if we especially look at the state of Karnataka, it actually loses 11% of its annual grain production to the elephant raiding itself. Then there is extraction of forest products taking place. For example, non-timber products as well, for the purpose of fuel, firewood, etc. And at the same time, illegal mining, as we discussed that this region has prominent mines of iron, bauxite and manganese, illegal mining has also started taking place here. So for example, there is a very famous movie where there is the illegal cutting of sandalwood trees is being done. The movie called as Pushpa. So a lot of Pushpa has arisen and illegal mining has started taking place. Sand mafias has emerged. So all that seems very good in the movies. However, in the real life, it can have devastating impacts on the environment. Then other threats are, as per the Western Ghat Spatial Decision Support System of 2022, it has actually led to the fragmentation of the interior forests as well. Not only the forests which are near or in the vicinity of the human population, but the interior forests are also degrading. So for example, the report said that there is 20 to 25% reduction in these interior forests. Also 5% evergreen forest cover has been lost as well. And the reason for that, according to the report, is the unplanned development, as we see that there is 5% simultaneous increase in the urban settlements in the region of Western Ghats, as well as 9% increase in the agricultural area as well. The other reasons are the introduction of invasive species which are not familiar to the native region, and these invasive species has got allelopathic activity, where they make sure that they grow on the expense of the native species. So they do not let native species grow along with them. For example, invasive flora species, they release a resin like a substance which actually makes the soil acidic and thus degrade the land, preventing the growth of the native plants. Some important invasive species in the Western Ghat region is your eucalyptus, wattle acacia, Lantana camara and Senna spectabilis. Also remember these facts for your prelims. Then there are certain extreme weather events about which we are reading quite frequently these days, such as the cyclones, the flash floods and the heat waves. Now there is a reason why Western Ghats is called as the greater escarpment of India, because the soil which it has, it is not as solid as the northern region, rather it has a fissile soil structure because of its volcanic origin. So it is very much prone to the landslides, frequent landfalls, all of that which take place, and that is being further exacerbated by these extreme weather events. Then there are a lot of hydropower projects which has sprung up to increase the productivity of the energy, to further utilize this water for the human consumption. And as you guys can see here on the map, it is basically these hydropower projects are damming the Western Ghats. Then there is increasing level of pollution, obviously because of the establishment of various agrochemical industries. There is leaching of pollutants which is taking place in the Western Ghat, and at the same time because of the human consumption and the increase of human population as well, which is basically destroying, as you guys can see here, from the plastic pollution which is taking place at idle trekking locations such as Western Ghats in the Chikmagalur district of Karnataka. So all these issues, such invasive species, such hydropower projects, the increasing plastic pollution, the anthropogenic activities have actually led to the Western Ghats being categorized as the Special Concern category by the World Heritage Outlook, which was released by the IUCN. And as per the IUCN estimate, by the year of 2050, if these activities keep on continuing with the same pace, it can actually lead to the complete disappearance of Western Ghat. Now, because of these issues, the government has taken several steps. So, it has brought several areas of Western Ghat under the protected areas. The protected areas such as national parks, for example, your Bandipur National Park, Bannerghatta National Park, your Nagarhole National Park, all of that which is in the region of Western Ghat. Several important biosphere reserves has been created. For example, Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, which actually springs in 3 states of Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Several important tiger reserves has also been created. But keep this in mind that all these protected areas only form 10% of the total area of Western Ghat. Thus, the government decided that it is going to bring majority of the region of the Western Ghat under the ecological sensitive areas. The ecological sensitive areas which the government is going to designate under the Environment Protection Act of 1986, which is basically going to create a buffer zone around the protected areas, and it will lead to the reduction of the anthropogenic activities in this particular region, where several activities will be prohibited, such as commercial mining, the commercial uses of timber, the industries which falls in the polluting category, any major hydroelectric project or the project which has got generation capacity of more than 25 megawatt, and the discharge of solid waste will be completely prohibited in the perennial rivers which drains the Western Ghat region. Then certain activities will be strictly regulated, such as felling of trees, establishment of hotels, commercial use of natural water, the underground cables, right? So for example, that is important as well. If we want to take the optical fiber cables and to increase the digital connectivity under the Digital India mission, so for that purpose we need to create these underground cables. So they will not be prohibited, rather they will be restricted. Then any kind of drastic change in cropping patterns cannot take place, and that will be regulated as well. So to designate these ecologically sensitive areas, the government appointed 2 committees. The first was the Gadgil committee, which was appointed in the year of 2011, and it submitted its report in September 2011. Now what did the Gadgil committee said? The Gadgil committee said that the entire stretch of Western Ghat should be declared as ecologically sensitive areas, and then it shall be divided into 3 categories of various protection 1, 2 and 3, where it said that such determination of protection shall be done on block and taluka level, and no new polluting industry, whether in red or orange category, it will be permitted, especially in ESZ1 and ESZ2. And if there is any existing industry in such red and orange category, then that shall be completely phased out by 2016. So 100% protection to this Western Ghat region by bringing them completely under the ecologically sensitive area. That was the recommendation of Gadgil. However, as you can clearly expect, it led to a wide furor, because a lot of industries, a lot of industrialists, the whole economy, all of that was going to be disrupted. At the same time, keep this in mind that we are not a developed nation. We are a developing nation, where we are facing a lot of issues such as unemployment, mass scale of poverty, the people who does not even have the mere income to feed their belly for 2 times a day. That is why it is obvious that all this industrial activity cannot be completely halted. That is why the government appointed another committee in 2013, which is called as Kasturi Rangan Committee, which actually divided the Western Ghat into 2 regions, one of natural landscape and the other of a cultural landscape. The cultural landscape which has got more penetration of human activity. Then it said that of the natural landscape, merely 37% area shall be designated as an ecologically sensitive area. And this demarcation shall be done at the village level. and only those industries which falls in red category, which means that they are highly polluting industry such as the minings, they shall be only completely restricted. The government said that okay, we are not going to accept the Gadgil report, rather we are going to accept the Kasturi Rangan report, and as we have seen from 2014 onwards, the government has formed various panels to demarcate these ecologically sensitive areas. Now, what can be the ideal way forward to protect this Western Ghats? The first is obviously that we need to prevent the fragile ecosystem. How we can do that? By promoting the organic agriculture in that particular area, by using sustainable land uses methods, by ensuring that the planning of urbanization, if it is taking place, that shall be done on a planned level. The second is that we need to engage all the stakeholders. By that we mean the villagers, the civil society organizations which are working in that particular region, the government, the local administration, and all of that should be brought at the one platform to address the concerns of the local, where we need to understand that there is urgent requirement of sustainable development in the region. A sustainable development which means that the development is taking place, but at the same time it is not hampering or adversely impacting the environment in the region. Then we need to adopt certain climate proofing actions as well, such as the adoption of renewable energy at large scale, especially in the southern region of Western Ghat, and to implement this ecologically sensitive area as soon as possible, even if we are going to follow the Kasturi Rangan report lines, right? And we are not going to follow the Gadgil report line, which is obviously going to say that 100% area shall be demarcated as an ecologically sensitive area. So on the basis of this discussion, try to solve this particular question. Ideally, you can comment your answer in the comment box as well. We move forward to the next news. As per the Earth System Science Data Report, India now has become the world's second largest source of the nitrous oxide emission. This increasing nitrous oxide emission and the concerns associated with that forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment pollution and degradation. So let's first try to understand what are the findings of the report, according to which India now has become the second largest nitrous oxide emitter, contributing to the 11% of the global emission. It is just behind China, which ranks at number 1 with 16% of the total global emission of the nitrous oxide. So India is second, USA is third, Brazil is fourth, and Russia is fifth, and these are the top 5 emitters of nitrous oxide in the world. According to the report, the major source for this nitrous oxide emission, 74% of that actually comes from fertilizer uses, especially in the last decade. The 8% is coming from the emission from the primary power plants, the 6% is coming from the chemical production, 5% from the manure management of the animals, 5% is from the transportation, that is coming from the vehicular emission, and 2% from the other sources. If we look specifically at the data of 2022, the N2O concentration in the atmospheric level has actually reached 25% above the pre-industrial level, and that has contributed to 6.4% of the effective radiative forcing, as well as increase of 0.1 degrees Celsius in the global temperature to the current global warming. Then in the last 4 decades, between 1980 to 2020, there has been 40% increase in this nitrous oxide emission. Specifically, the responsibility of that shall be taken by us humans. So as we have established that there is a rising concern of the increasing emission of the nitrous oxide, let's first try to understand what exactly is nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is basically an odorless, a colorless, and a non-inflammable gas. So for example, if you are visiting a dentist and that dentist is actually using a sedative, that is nitrous oxide. Or if you are watching a rocket fly in the space, or if you are looking at any industry and any kind of emission is coming from that, that also contains the nitrous oxide. The nitrous oxide, which is basically a greenhouse gas. What is a greenhouse gas? So to understand that, let's try to understand the solar radiation and how that functions. So the sun's radiation travels towards the earth. Almost 50% of that is either reflected or absorbed by the cloud and atmosphere. The rest actually reaches the earth, where it is absorbed by the ocean and land. But at the same time, Earth, to maintain its solar budget, it plays a vital role where it actually releases the heat back towards the space, which is called as infrared radiation. These greenhouse gases, they actually absorb these infrared radiation. So they act like a blanket which is covering the earth, and when the earth is trying to radiate the heat outward, they are preventing that and thus leading to the rising of the temperature or the global warming on our planet, which according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change sixth assessment report, there has been already increase of 1.15 degrees Celsius in the temperature. What is our Paris Agreement? The Paris Agreement aims to curtail the rise of this temperature up to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2100. So that seems highly unlikely if such emissions will keep on rising. Now, this nitrous oxide is actually a major cause of concern. The reason for that is that first of all, it has a long atmospheric lifetime up to 120 years. And if we look at its global warming potential, it has 310 times more global warming potential than carbon dioxide. However, still the carbon dioxide is the most or the major factor for the global warming. Why is that happening when nitrous oxide has more global warming potential? The reason for that is that, let's say in the atmosphere, if there is 1000 carbon dioxide molecule, in comparison to that there is only one nitrogen oxide molecule. The global warming potential of various greenhouse gases has been given here in the chronological manner. So the lowest is of carbon dioxide, then methane, then nitrous oxide, then hydrofluorocarbon, then perfluorocarbon, and finally the sulfur hexafluoride. So now, as we have established the major cause of concern which is associated with nitrous oxide, let's try to understand the various sources of its emission. The first is obviously the natural sources. So if we look at the natural sources, they are atmospheric deposition on the land, the natural soil, or it can come from the coastal waters or even from the wetlands. Wetlands are also responsible for it. Oceans releases them as well. Then the climate and CO2 effects, if we look at the anthropogenic sources, the biomass burning, the agriculture or the large scale of fertilizer use which is taking place in agriculture, then the deforestation pulse effect which takes place, the wastewater, for example the sewage, the drainage, all of that acts as the source of the nitrous oxide to the larger atmosphere. Another very important source is actually, very surprisingly, but yes, it is true, that is the rice cultivation. So in India, how we cultivate the rice? We actually take a paddy. First we fill the fields with a little bit of water and then we go for the paddy transplantation. Now here it actually leads to the submergence of soil. So here it actually leads to the difficulty of oxygen to now dissolve in soil. Now in this anaerobic conditions which has occurred, the bacteria, they actually goes into a redox reduction, and this redox reaction actually leads to a process which is called as methanogenesis. Because of this process of methanogenesis, a large amount of methane as well as nitrous oxide is released. At the same time, to further increase the yield of this crop, as we were following in the green revolution, a large scale use of fertilizer is done as well. And to make these fertilizer as well, you actually need let's say some kind of acids such as your nitric acid. These nitric acids actually release a lot of nitrous oxide. At the same time, when this fertilizer or this nitrogen based fertilizer is being given to the crop, the bacteria which is present in the soil, it goes into the reaction called as nitrification, and that also releases nitrous oxide. So can we say that high amount of rice cultivation can actually lead to a large scale production of nitrous oxide? Just on the basis of this discussion, try to solve these two important questions, one in 2010 and another in 2022, and comment your answers in the comment box. Also, there is a myth that UPSC does not repeat its questions. Just have a look at these questions and see how closely they are framed. Now, moving forward in the direction, what are the steps which has been taken by our government to actually curtail this nitrous oxide emission? The first is that we have adopted for the BS6 Bharat Stage 6 fuel norm, or the emission standard, which is based on the European standards. So that can actually lead to, so let's say there is a car and that car has to cover 1 kilometer of distance, and now it has adopted this BS6th stage emission standard. So that will actually lead to 70% less reduction of nitrous oxide in comparison to the earlier versions if the car is of diesel. And if it is of petrol, then that will lead to 25 to 30% less emission of nitrous oxide. Then the government is also providing nutrient based subsidy, where we are actually trying or encouraging the farmers to increase the consumption of phosphorus as well as potash based fertilizer, so that we can actually achieve the ideal nitrogen phosphorus potash ratio, that is 4:2:1. The government has also launched the soil health card, where the soil sample collections are taken, where the soil, the farmer's soil is individually monitored, checked, regulated, and on the basis of that, the government provides a particular fertilizer ratio which shall be used by the farmers. Then recently, the IFCO has created liquid nano urea. Now the liquid nano urea can actually reduce 25 to 30% of urea consumption, because it is very specific and it can be delivered to the crop at the micro level. Then the National Air Quality Index, it actually measures and try to regulate the emission of nitrous oxide. As well as India has recently endorsed the Colombo Declaration of 2019, which aims to halve the nitrogen waste by the year of 2030. So all these steps has been taken by our country, but still there are certain pragmatic steps which can be taken as per the United Nations Environment Programme report. The first is obviously to regulate the fertilizer dependency. So just look at the table here, guys, and you can see that how our fertilizer production has kept on increasing in the recent years, which is a high level of concern for us. And at the same time, it's not like that if we have increased the use of fertilizer, the yield of the crop has increased as well. That has not happened. So for example, just look here how the crop yield has actually significantly declined from the 1960s, which actually marked the introduction of the green revolution in our country. Thus, there is high need to regulate this fertilizer dependency, to bring it down. And one step which we can take in that direction is to switch to organic farming, right? Where we just try to utilize important methods such as zero farming or your zero tillage farming. All of that can be adopted. The micro level irrigation can be adopted. We can start using, instead of fertilizer, the organic manures. On this line, the government has also launched the scheme such as Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, the Gobar Dhan Yojana. At the same time, we need to switch to clean fuel to reduce down the vehicular emission of nitrous oxide. For that also, we have launched the ethanol blended program, under which we have set ourselves an ambitious target to have 20% ethanol blending into petrol by the year of 2025. Then the UNEP report also highlights that we can adopt measures such as flue gas recirculation. So the flue gas, which is actually released by the industries, it can actually be recirculated to provide heat and energy to the industries, and that can lead to 20 to 50% of NOx reduction. But as the UNEP report highlights itself, it is a very expensive procedure. So keep these innovative suggestions in your mind, and we move forward to the next news. The ongoing spell of the extreme heat in many parts of the country, it has actually reopened the discussion on the inclusion of heat waves as a notified disaster under the Disaster Management Act of 2005. Now, this notified disasters forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of disaster management. So let's first try to understand what are the salient features of the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which was actually enacted in the wake of 1999 Odisha super cyclone which took place and the Indian Ocean tsunami which hit our coast in 2004. This Disaster Management Act of 2005, it actually explains the disaster as any catastrophe or calamity which is actually arising from any natural or man-made cause, and that has led to the significant loss of life or various kind of damages to the properties, as well as it has significantly impacted or altered the environmental conditions. The Disaster Management Act also establishes the National Disaster Response Fund and the State Disaster Response Fund to provide an adequate response to the emergency which has taken place. Now let's try to understand this National Disaster Response Fund, which is actually kept under the public accounts of India. What does that mean? It basically means that now the government does not require any kind of parliamentary approval to take out funds from National Disaster Response Fund, because it has been not kept under the Consolidated Fund of India, rather in the public accounts of India. Now such funds can only be used for meeting the expense for the emergency response to that disaster, to provide relief and rehabilitation to the people which has been affected. And keep this important thing in your mind, that such fund cannot be used at all for the disaster preparedness, to actually prepare for the disaster which is going to come, for restoration, or to provide compensation for the loss and damage which has occurred to the people. Now, if you look at the funding mechanism of this fund, the 100% share of the National Disaster Response Fund is actually provided by the central government. Now, let's say, what about the State Disaster Response Fund? So here the central government, it actually provides the 75% of the share. The 25% of the share is actually contributed by the state government. But what if the state falls under the category of a special category status, as the status which is being actually demanded by Andhra Pradesh recently? So in that case, the central government will provide for the 90% of the funds under the State Disaster Response Fund. Now, the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which actually establishes this National Disaster Response Fund under the Section 46, it also lays down that the state government, so let's say I'm a particular state, my state name is TO, and in this TO state, there is a disaster which is taking place. So now, can I go directly to the central government to ask for funds under the NDRF? No. First, I will need to use my funds under the SDRF. Only when those funds has become inadequate to provide the response to the disaster, then I will need to submit a memorandum of understanding, where I will actually indicate the sector-wise damage which has taken place. Then the central government is actually going to assess the damage which has taken place in my state, and only after that it is going to provide me the funds. Now, what are the disasters for which actually such funds can be provided? There are 12 such disasters. The disasters such as cold wave, a cyclone, drought, earthquake, a flood or a high intensity rainfall, any flood if it has taken place in urban areas as well, the fire, frost, hailstorm, landslides as we were discussing in the regions of Western Ghats, the pest attack or the tsunami which took place in 2004. So for all these 12 disasters, such funds can be availed. Keep this in mind that there are two important missings. What if you hit by lightning? That is not covered. Also, the heat waves which you are currently facing, right? The scorching heat wave of above 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. Even for that, such funds is not availed. Now, what is the rationale for the inclusion of such heat wave? So it is obvious that when this act was actually being enacted in 2005, heat waves used to be considered as a seasonal phenomena and not with this much of intensity as well, right? So if you guys remember, we used to have those summer vacations for 1 or 2 months. Correct? But now, as we can see from the various reports, that these heat waves are actually increasing in numbers. If you look at the Indian Meteorological Department data, just look at the spike in the heat wave days which took place in 2022, and there were actually more heat waves in 2022 itself in the last 3 years combined. Even recently, the Indian Meteorological Department has released another red alert of heat waves which is going to face in the country. Thus, the severity and frequency of these heat waves has actually increased in the last 15 years. Now we know that almost 90% of our India's economy is actually informal. So there are a lot of people. For example, if you are currently sitting at your home with all comfort and you are going to order the food, the Zomato guy which is actually going to come with your food, he is going to face that scorching heat. And thus he is more prone or has got more exposure to heat stroke. The share of such informal economy has increased. So the number of people who have got exposure to this heat has also increased as well. Then, as per the report, there exist insufficient funds for the heat action plan. So let's say as a state government, I am going to respond to this heat wave which is taking place. I am going to create shades for the people. I am going to provide for them public drinking water facilities. I am going to provide for them oral solutions which can be distributed. But for all of this, I am going to need finance, which I lack because I cannot avail such fund either from State Disaster Response Fund or from NDRF. That is the major issue, and that is also the major rationale for the inclusion. However, there is an argument which has been provided by the central government, where the first and foremost there is a kind of hesitancy which exists among the Finance Commission. So if we look at the 15th Finance Commission 2021 to 26, which provided for this particular time period, the sharing of financial resources between the center and state government under the Article 280 of the Constitution. So it said that the existing list of disasters, the 12 notified disasters, it already covers the need of the states to the large extent. Also, as an additional measure, it provided that 10% of the state disaster response fund can be availed for the local disasters. So under that, till now, 4 states such as Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, they have actually notified heat wave as a local disaster, and thus they can avail 10% of the SDRF. Then there actually exists a hesitancy among the central government as well, where it says that under the National Disaster Management Act of 2005, there exists a compulsory monetary compensation which shall be provided. So let's say if you died because of heat wave, and now heat wave is covered under as a notified disaster under the NDMA, then the central government will need to pay you at least 4 lakh rupees. Now in 2024 itself, almost 500 plus reported death has been occurred because of heat wave. So just multiply this 500 with 4 lakh. And just imagine the amount of expenditure which will actually have to be incurred by the central government. The second is that there can also start taking place false demand for compensation, because actually there is no absolute measure or method to actually avail or justify this, that this death has been occurred by the heat stroke. Many a time the heat stroke actually exacerbates the already comorbidities which exist in the patient. Thus, there is a lot of difficulty in the identification of the deaths by the heat waves as well. That can become a major challenge. Then there exists the insufficient funds, because in 2021 to 2026, the Finance Commission said that the central government shall release at least 1.6 lakh crore rupees to these SDRFs. As we can see here, only 2 states has actually availed the funds from NDRF, that is Himachal Pradesh and Sikkim, in between the financial year of 2023 to 2024. All of this expenditure can actually lead to high fiscal deficit, while we are targeting to reduce our fiscal deficit to 4.5% by the year of 2025. Thus, to tackle these major challenges, there are a lot of steps which has to be taken. The heat action plan shall be improved. There also, we can include the heat wave in the plans of the notified disaster, but then certain adequate preventive measures shall be taken as well. Now, to keep all these suggestions in your mind, also suggest some innovative methods in the comment box which can be taken to curtail the heat wave which is taking place. And we move forward to the next news. Recently, the president has turned down the mercy petition of a Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorist who was actually involved in December 2000 Red Fort attack, which actually led to the killing of 3 army personals. This concept of mercy petition and the pardoning power of president forms an important component of your prelims paper under the larger theme of polity. Let's first try to understand what is the pardoning power of the president under Article 72. Under Article 72, the president can actually pardon a person who has been convicted of some offense if that offense falls under the union law, if the punishment has been given by the court martial or the military courts, or if the punishment is also the sentence of death. Keep this in mind that when president is functioning here, this does not fall as a judicial feature of the president, rather it is actually an executive power of the president. And also this Article 72, when president is actually sitting to provide the pardon, he is not sitting as the court of appeal. This idea of mercy petition is basically where, let's say I have been convicted by some heinous crime, let's say for life imprisonment or let's say for death, then this is going to be my last recourse to save my life. And that has been provided to me under the Article 21, which provides me the right to live. So this is basically a formal procedure where I am going to write a petition, either me or my relatives, to the president and ask for his mercy, thus called as mercy petition. Now there are 5 kind of pardoning powers of president which has been laid down under the Article 72 of the Constitution. The first is obviously the pardoning. The pardoning basically means the completely absolvement of the convict. So let's say whatever the punishment which was given to me by the court, I just go to the president, I plead before him and the president completely pardons me. So now I am completely a free man. The second is basically the commutation, which is basically the substitution of one form of punishment for a lighter punishment. So let's say I got a death sentence, I went to the president, I pleaded before him and the president provided me that okay, now from death he is commuting my sentence to life imprisonment. Thus the form of punishment has been changed here. The third is remission. Remission is nothing but reducing the period of the sentence, right? So basically the mission which was given before, now that is being remitted. So let's say earlier I had got 2 years of rigorous life imprisonment. Now that is being converted to 1 year of rigorous imprisonment. Then there is respite. So respite actually derives from a special case. Special case as such that let's say I am a pregnant lady. And now I cannot do rigorous imprisonment, right? I cannot just involve myself in rigorous work in the prisons. So then the nature of that will be changed because of this special case, and that is respite. Reprieve is basically a kind of a stay which is provided for the temporary period. Keep this in mind that these kind of pardoning power is actually very important, where we can see from this important message that a country would be the most imperfect and deficient in a political morality if there is no power of clemency or pardoning power of the president. So also remember that under Article 161 of the Constitution, the governor has got the similar pardoning power. So is the pardoning power of president and governor is exactly the same? The answer is no. See, if there is a pardoning sentence which has been inflicted by the court martials or the army court, then the governor has no role to play in that. That can be pardoned only by the president. The second is that if there is pardoning of death sentence, either by a central law or by the state law, the governor has no power in that. That can be pardoned only by the president. However, if there is a death sentence, but now we are not pardoning it, not completely pardoning. Rather, we are suspending, remitting or commuting it. In that case, governor and president both has similar power. So we can say that in the suspension, remission or commutation of death sentence, the president and governor has concurrent powers. Now try to understand the procedure of the mercy petition. Keep this in mind that there is no statutory written procedure for mercy petition. Here, it is completely based on precedents and covenants. So now, who can write a petition to the president? Either me or my relatives. Now, this petition is actually forwarded to the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is going to examine the case and then advise the president accordingly. As held by the Supreme Court in Maruram versus Union of India 1981, the power to be exercised by the president, this power of pardoning, it shall be exercised on the advice of cabinet. Now when I am writing the petition to the president, what are my rights? Do I have a right to oral hearing by the president? Absolutely not. Can I claim this mercy as my right under Article 21? Absolutely not. Also, the president is not bound to give any reason. So if he is just going to reject my petition or throw it in the dustbin, the president is not bound to give me any reasons at all. Then, is this whole procedure of petition, mercy petition, does it fall under the subject to judicial review? And the answer is yes, as it was held by the Supreme Court in April Sudhakar 2006, where it said that the pardoning power of President falls under the category of judicial review, where there can be some biases which can take place, or for example the case was not thoroughly examined by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So in those cases it actually falls under the subject to judicial review. Keep this important facts in your mind. We move forward to the next news. The article actually highlights the issue of a fatty liver disease which is impacting not only Indians but worldwide. And this issue of fatty liver disease falls in category of your GS2 paper under the theme of health. Let's first try to understand what is this fatty liver disease. The fatty liver disease, which is now known from a new nomenclature called as metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease or MASLD, which eventually leads to your liver inflammation, and that is impacting almost 25 to 30% of the global population as well as 38.6% of the Indian adults as per the study conducted by the Apollo hospitals. The liver inflammation, where your liver actually starts getting swollen. Earlier we used to associate it with a lot of drinking habits, a lot of alcohol consumption, all of that. But now there are certain new causes which has emerged, such as one is obviously the obesity. So if you are kind of a lover of samosa, jalebi, please do not watch this section. Then diabetes, high blood pressure, which you might be having if you are following such unhygienic eating habits, or to have the abnormal cholesterol level. Now let's try to understand how this liver inflammation actually takes place. See, let's say if I am consuming a lot of refined carb and sugar, having 2 or 3 samosas daily, then I am actually indulging in my body too much of glucose. Now to process this glucose, my body will actually start producing high amount of insulin, and thus with high amount of insulin production over a period of time, there will arise in my body called as insulin resistance. Thus, there will take place the conversion of excessive glucose, which is now being remained in my body, which is now not being affected by the insulin, that will start converting into the fatty acids, and that will store in my liver, leading to the liver inflammation. Now, there are certain steps which we can take to actually counter this fatty liver disease. The first and foremost is obviously the Eat Right India movement, which was launched by Food Safety and Standard Authority of India, where it tries to promote hygienic eating habits, to create certain good amount of food standards in various hotels. So all that steps is being taken under the Eat Right India movement. Then we need to focus on the personalization of healthcare. So for example, we can regularly measure our body mass index. We can regularly measure our waist to hip ratio to see how much amount of the visceral fat has been stored. So with all that, we can try to identify whether we are prone to this obesity or diabetes or not. Then a regular pre-medical checkup, that shall be our priority, right? Where we can regularly go and check our sugar level, to check our RBCs, to have a full body checkup. Then a liver fibrosis assessment has been suggested by the report, where it says that such advanced method shall be adopted to have a thorough checkup of the liver. And for that purpose, we can also actually use the artificial intelligence diagnosis. So with the use of artificial intelligence, we can actually form our family genetic history. We can also see that how our eating habits is impacting and which parts of our body. And there was a mains question which was actually asked by UPSC on this very same lines. So keep the fatty liver disease and these important suggestions in your mind. We move forward to the next segment, where we are going to cover some important news which can help you to eliminate some important statements in your prelims examination. The first is about the deepest freshwater lake. So which is actually the deepest freshwater lake as well as the largest freshwater lake in the world? And the answer is Lake Baikal. The Lake Baikal, which is basically in the southern Russia, and it is actually 1.6 kilometer deep. The reason for its depth is that because it actually is formed because of an active rift continental zone, which is actually spreading 2.5 centimeter per year, and thus this lake is getting deepened each and every year. Now the question arises that when we say that the Lake Baikal is actually the largest freshwater lake, keep this that it is actually largest freshwater lake in the terms of volume. So which is actually the largest freshwater lake in the world in the term of surface area? And the answer is Lake Superior, which lies on the boundary of US and Canada. The same question can also be replicated in our country as well. So the largest freshwater lake in the terms of volume in our country is your Wular Lake, and the largest lake in the terms of surface area in our country is Vemnath Lake. The questions for you guys is that which is the largest brackish water lake in our country? Just comment that in the answer. We move forward to the next news, where we are going to talk about a new HIV vaccine which is actually being suggested. A new HIV vaccine which can actually curtail the human immunodeficiency virus which takes place, and that we are going to devise on the neutralizing antibodies called as BNAB, which has got the potential to actually neutralize the circulating viral strains in an HIV patient. However, the challenges still persist, where it actually takes a lot of years for the formation of these neutralizing antibodies in the patient. So by the time they actually develop, the patient has already reached to that stage where his or her immunity has actually declined drastically. The reason for such long gestation period for making of such antibodies is because the parental B cell that makes BNAB, it is actually extremely rare to find in a genetic pool. Thus, the report has actually suggested for the use of germline targeting method. As you guys can see from the data here, from the global HIV statistics, it is a major concern, and the need of such vaccine is actually imperative. The third news we are going to talk about the Satnami sect, which according to the report, this Satnami sect was actually started or the first propagated by the idea of Satnam, which was popularized by the Kabir. The Kabir who lived in 15th century, and he was actually a Nirgun sect, where he was completely against the idolatry, and he actually used to promote a non-absolute form of God which he called as Satnam, or the only true God. Then in 1657, there was a mendicant Birbhan who actually founded this Satnami community, getting inspired from the idea of Kabir in the region of Narnaul in Haryana. Now, as the report highlights, the contemporary Mughal historian of that time, whose name was Khafi Khan, who wrote this important book called as Muntakhab al-Lubab, he actually addresses the existence of such Satnami community in the region of Haryana and Punjab. And he defines their characteristic features, such as they used to condemn the caste rituals. They had a hostility towards authority and wealth because they were coming from an untouchable community where they used to majorly involve themselves in leather works. These Satnamis, they actually revolted against the exorbitant tax revenue policy of Aurangzeb, and the battle has actually been described by Saki Mustad Khan in the book called as Maser-e-Alamgiri, where he wrote, and I quote, that these Satnamis actually replicated the great war scenes of Mahabharata. Now, the sect was actually completely routed by Aurangzeb, and then it had a later revival period in 19th century under Jagjivan Das in Uttar Pradesh and Guru Ghasidas in Chhattisgarh. Keep these important things in your mind. We have reached to the last news of our day, where we are going to talk about the headline inflation. So generally, the retail inflation in our country is actually measured by the consumer price index combined, where the highest share is of food and beverages, that is 45.86. Then the housing has a share of 10, the fuel and light around 6 to 7%, and then various other services has different kind of shares. Now, what is the core inflation and headline inflation? So core inflation is basically the inflation which persists for a long period of time, which does not changes on daily basis and make headlines in the news. For example, the inflation in housing, in transportation, medical and electronics. However, there are certain things which changes very rapidly on the basis of supply and demand, and those are food and energy. This food and energy actually constitutes your headline inflation. The total inflation is called as the consumer price index combined inflation, which according to the recent report has actually declined up to 4.5%, a good sign for our economy. With this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.